that skill that makes people trust you faster in business, particularly in a sales environment, but not just a sales environment. I think we need to look at this as just our general business operations environment as well, because some people feel easy to trust, don't they? It doesn't matter, you meet them somewhere and you just get that they are a good person. And it's not like there's any, you know, intellectual reason why you think they're great. You don't know what their qualifications are. You don't know what their background is, but you just feel like you can trust them instantly. And this isn't some sort of personality hack, or it's not pure luck, and it's not necessarily even intuition. It's really something you can learn. It's a skill you can learn to become that person that is trusted a lot more quickly. So we're going to look at why rapport matters, and it's a lot more than you actually think when it comes to that know, like, trust process of doing business with someone. We're going to look at the real, like, day-to-day mechanics of how trust forms, particularly with business owners, and some of the simple behaviors that really can change a conversation around from being very mistrusting, very skeptical, to something a lot more trusting. And in some real moments, look at what you can do right there on the fly when it counts. Now, these are things which can be taking years to sort of train into yourself, but the reality is there's nothing in here which is ultimately revolutionary. There's nothing here that I go, oh, this is my magic formula that I pulled out of my head. These are just real psychology applied to the business environment. So, rapport is something that happens when someone feels really safe. They feel like there's no danger in this room. They feel like there's trust in there. They feel like the person they're talking to understands them and is aligned with their interests and their good outcomes as well. So they're not only safe, which is important in any environment, because people don't really want to listen when they're not safe. They go into fight or flight, which means they're not really comprehending what's going in. They're just reacting. And then the understood part is that they feel like you understand where they're coming from, what their issues are, and why they happen to be there in the first place. And then alignment then is not necessarily, sorry, a business alignment. It's like a personal alignment, an alignment of the way you think, the way you present, the way they wish to be thought about and presented, and they feel like you're a good match. And we go through this in dating, right? When we're finding life partners and husbands and wives and whatnot, all that is part of that same process of feeling safe, feeling understood, and feeling like there's an alignment between you. And that's essentially what a partnership, whether it's business or personal, is. Because people don't trust you because you're impressive, because there's lots of very impressive people in the world, but they trust you because they feel more seen, like way more seen than someone who is just, you know, um, someone who is just good at blowing their own trumpet. Like influencers, people like me, I guess, on LinkedIn. You might go, oh, that's a very impressive presence you have over there on that social media channel, but doesn't necessarily mean you trust me to work with me. I'd have to go a bit further into the detail and a bit more work at getting to know you before you trust to work with me. So yeah, they trust you because they feel that safe, seen, understood, and aligned with you as well. And the trust model is really about the fact that you're consistent. So if they see consistency in areas of the business, whether that's your marketing activity, when they see you out there actually delivering the services that you provide, that consistency feels safe. It's predictable, right? And we're kind of all looking for that safety and predictability. But then there's the warmth, that real human side where you meet someone and just go, gee, he was really nice, or she was really nice. And I really felt like, I was welcomed and I was warm. And I talk about warmth quite a lot in when I'm invited into rooms where I don't belong and into networks where I'm not really part of it. And there's that warmth of being welcomed. And I've felt that in the last 2 weeks quite a lot. And then there's the competence part of it. Because the consistency is great. That can be often just a systematic thing you do. The warmth is just, it could be one off, it could be a good day, but the actual competence, the capability of carrying out what you said you're able to do, that all comes together as trust. So it's not just the competence, not just the consistency, but it's consistency, competence, and that warmth of humanity as well. So if rapport is built out of trust, these are the ingredients that then go into that trust. They can trust that you're consistent. They can trust that you're warm and a good person to deal with. and you can actually deliver on what you said you can. Now, where we mostly get it wrong, most people think it's all about competence. So we talk about 25 years of experience. I mean, doing this for 30 years, and look at the clients we've got, and that's fine, but that's only one part of that. We often forget the warmth. We think, I've been doing this for 25 years. You should want to work with me because my work speaks for itself. Reality is, especially in an era where people are very present online and on platforms, is that your work doesn't speak for yourself. You speak for yourself. And so what happens is reputation will get you so far that might represent the competence, but it doesn't then fulfill the consistency or the warmth. We can sound smart, we can sound experienced, but if we still don't connect with that person because they're just not nice to connect with, I don't like to hang out with them. I don't feel like I can sit down and enjoy a beer with them or a coffee with them, then I'm just not going to feel like I want to work with them, am I? So the quick reflection is that we all tend to lean on something here. For me, it's I tend to over lean on the consistency of warmth and not necessarily on the delivery of competence and actually highlighting where I am very competent. So that's one of my weak spots. The warmth is generally there. I'm generally quite approachable and able to be talking with people very easily. But the consistency, that used to be a problem. I've worked extensively on that in the last few years to the point where I've now got good consistency going. I've got the warmth going. Now, what I need to do is not get competent, but be able to communicate that competence, be able to prove it. What is the proof that I deliver really good work in the area that I work in? Everyone has their own one. It tends to be more. For me, the warmth is where I lean the most, but I also need to get the consistency right, which I have, and then the competence. But yours could be that you're already very consistent, you're already very competent, but the warmth is missing. And that's generally where most business owners are at. The warmth is the part that's missing in that trust equation, but the consistency and competence is looking great. So most people, and this is where you, excuse me, build that warmth. Most people don't listen in conversations they have with their clients. In fact, not even just clients and in the case of business, but in any situation when you're dating, when you're meeting friends, you're not really listening to someone. You're just waiting for them to shut up so you can speak. And when that happens in a business sense, people feel that. They sense it. They very easily sense that this is a person who's not really listening to me. They're just waiting for me to shut up so they can pitch me their idea or pitch me their business or pitch me what they're selling. You get this when you get salespeople, particularly at a car yard. We pick on car salespeople, but the reality is every experience I've had with buying a car has been like this. They just want you to shut up so they can sell you the car, right? They can start listing features and benefits. And you get this in, proposal meetings when you're sitting down with someone and all they want to do is list you how many of this they got and how many of that you got and what is in here and what is in there. They don't have that warmth enough. They're not actually interested in you as a person. And when you have those meetings, you feel it. You really do feel it. It's like a great big invisible wall between you and that person because they are only there to sell you something. And in reality, in a business meeting, that's what we are both there. I'm there to buy, you're there to sell, or vice versa. We're both there to sell something to each other. But the reality is, what we're looking for is for someone to listen to me, to understand what my hopes, dreams, and possible things I want to achieve are. What is the pain points in my business that you might be able to help with? Because how can you possibly have that understood thing we saw before? And that whole idea that you understand and you align with me if you won't let me speak. And unfortunately, we go into this desperate sales mode quite a lot where we're just like sell, 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 sell. Any questions? And then wonder why they're just like, no. And then they never get back to us when we reach out to them for a follow-up. Active listening is one of those best tools, and it doesn't matter how often I deliver this in workshops or in seminars or in conferences, it's still something which is missing from most people. It's where you listen and you reflect and you repeat back that you've understood what that person has said. So active listening, we tend to think of, yes, nodding along. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's so easy to fake. Like you're just sitting there just going, yeah, yeah, yeah. But what you're really feeling, you're thinking about lunch, right? You're thinking about the things you want to do afterwards. But active listening is, yes, you're listening. You might be reacting physically as well, But what you're doing is reflecting on what the person has said. So you're hearing what they've said, you reflect upon it, and you repeat it back to them in the way that you understand. And one of the best ways I use to do this is by repeating the phrase. So what I'm hearing is, when I come back to them. So I want to make sure I've understood what they're saying by telling them what I've understood that I've heard. I've heard this. Is that right? Getting them to then understand that number one, I heard them, but also contribute to correcting me if I didn't hear them correctly. Because quite often people have different communication styles and they might be saying one thing but actually meaning something else, which is why you come back and you explain. So, what I'm hearing from you is that this, and this, and what you're looking for is this. Am I right there? Or is that about right? And they'll go, no, it's more this. And you go, great. And you're able to get much better alignment out of them. And then for people to have their own requirements repeated back to them is a powerful way to make them feel like they've been understood, they've been heard, and there's some alignment. Because the first step in alignment is you know what I need and you can deliver what I need because you understand what it is that I need. That's what active listening is essentially. In practice, it would say something like, so you're saying the client changed the brief again? And then the second part is, well, that sounds frustrating. So you're actually acknowledging what they're feeling as part of that. So that's also what active listening is. It's reflecting on what they just said. So you're saying the client changed the brief again, and you're coming back and saying, gee, that sounds frustrating. And they go, yeah, it is. That creates that rapport and alignment because you're not just repeating back the problem, which is saying, so you're saying the client changed the brief again. So what I'm hearing is that the client changed the brief again. Well, that doesn't fit in that line. But what you would say is, oh, that sounds frustrating. That sounds annoying. Oh, that's bloody annoying, isn't it? So whatever the language is you would use, I would say, well, that's bloody annoying, isn't it? And then they get to expand on it, but they also understand that you heard them, you understand them, and you're aligned with their annoyance, which means there's rapport being built there. Good listening is essentially a lack of interruption. You're not rushing people through a process to get them out in 15 minutes before I need to go to lunch. Or I need to do something more important. You're not trying to fix something in that conversation. And men, this is something that you need to learn when you're dealing with partners. You're not trying to fix them because they're mostly trying to tell you something. And it's just you being present. So you're not interrupting your client when they're trying to explain what their problem is. You're not trying to rush them through that by going, oh, yeah, okay, yeah. You're not trying to fix it there and then because you're not expected to fix it there and then. You're expected to understand it there and then. And then the presence part is that you just go, okay, well, tell me more. You're just there to hear the onslaught of what they get saying as their problems before you jump in and say, yeah, we can fix that. Yeah, we can fix that. You hear it all out because in amongst all that is also the important information you need to design the solution if you are designing some kind of solution or product for them. The mirroring and matching we often think of as they nod, we nod. If they turn left, we turn left, that sort of thing. It's a bit more subtle than that. It's not about mirroring, as in copying everything they do. It's about tuning into their way of speaking. So, for instance, if they speak in a way which is a little slower, you could probably slow down your speech as well in order not to copy them, not to mimic them, but to make them if they speak more slowly, they probably comprehend more slowly as well. And they're very detail oriented. So that's tuning into the person. Or if there's someone who's really distracted looking at watches, looking at phones and all that, what you can do is just ensure that there's clarity in the things you say. So you're not copying them by being distracted and looking at your phone. You then go, okay, there's someone who needs that they're tuning out right now. So I need to tune into them as well. So what the things are that you can match is a lot of body language. There's a sort of a casual sit back in the chair body language. You can do that too. And that creates a sense of alignment. Sitting like sort of leaning into a table also you can match that. So in these cases of body language, a lot of that is matched. Some people weaponize body language. I know the whole Trump art of the deal kind of a lot of that manosphere stuff, which is around sitting a certain way so it projects power and dominance. That doesn't work in sales at all unless you're trying to bully people into doing things they don't want to do and essentially becoming customers who will eventually leave you anyway. But the voice, speed, and tone is an area that you can not mimic, but mirror. If they are a slower speaker, don't go babbling because it becomes overwhelming and they don't feel like they can get a word in. But at the same time, if there's someone who does speak faster, you can tell they actually process information faster and can probably cope with you speaking faster as well. Aggressive tone doesn't need to be matched with aggression, but what happens is a lower tone probably will be received better if you come back in a lower tone as well. By lower tone, I mean a little bit more calm, a calmer tone. So if you're coming back with a hyper aggressive, like yeah, 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 and the other person's very chill, you're not aligned, right? So this is where, as the provider, as the business, you can really help out with the whole alignment thing by simply making sure that you are matching what their speed of speaking is and the kind of tone they've got as well. And then there's the words. So if there's someone who swears a lot, they're probably not going to be offended if you swear a bit too. To change all your way of speaking. But then there's if they've got the excuse me, if there's someone who is much more formal in their language, then to be then much more clear and formal in your language. Or there's someone who speaks in very simple, plain English, then you can do that too. Understand the language people speak is usually the language that they can also hear in. So if they are very clear and have very specific words they use, you can use those words as well because they already understand what those are. With the same language, is might be when someone says, something like, I need clarity on this, then you know that they understand the concept of clarity. So you can come back with, let's get clear on this. So clear, clarity, the same root word, it makes sense. It's like saying, at the moment, business is skyrocketing. If they say that, then you go, okay, well, when we go into launch, and this is really much more advanced stuff where you're speaking that same kind of language, whether it's hustle language like launch and skyrocket, or whether it's more slow and more not slow, but more gentle and organic. So someone who's saying, I'm looking for some alignment in the people that I'm working with. You wouldn't then say, all right, what we need to do is like conquer and take over and climb mountains and hustle. You wouldn't use that language. You use something more like that's more aligned with what they've said. So if they're looking for alignment, you say, so what we can do is find ways of organically finding the kind of people that certainly do fit with what you're trying to do. And that way you're speaking the same language, not the same words, but the same tone and feel. And that can be a little hard for people to do without a bit of practice. When you don't match and you got different pace and different tones, it feels awkward, it feels disconnected, and you don't get that trust. You don't get that alignment. And that's why it's more important than what we often think it is. Even though we often go for, okay, I've got this much experience and done this much stuff. And you're going, well, why aren't I signing more people on? Why are people not going through and using me to do this thing? It's probably because you've got your pace of pitching and they don't want to be pitched. You've got you've got your tone of speaking, but they don't want to be spoken to. So therefore you don't get that connection. You don't get that trust, despite your superior experiences, your superior background, and your superior processes. The tone doesn't work. And this is the human factor. It's why essentially AI will never really truly be able to give that kind of rapport, is because this is a very human thing and requires a lot of signals that aren't just text. It takes in person, it takes, body language, it takes tone, pace, and it needs to adjust from person to person, client to client, customer to customer. It's always going to feel a little different. So part of what you can do with the handling those tense conversations, sorry about that, an unaligned word there. The sequence would be, as you hear someone say something rather tense and something quite, perhaps more confrontational, don't just spit back a response. You need to take a moment to pause. And this is very stock standard kind of conflict resolution language. Pause and then acknowledge what they just said. I'm hearing you there. So what I'm hearing is this, and then respond. It's a really simple sequence that really helps to keep that trust moving when there's something where you're not quite aligned with each other. It brings the alignment back because you have acknowledged and repeated back what they've said to you, and you've responded appropriately and within the context of what they've said, rather than you just coming back with your script saying, oh, but this is what we do. Oh, but this is what we do. You're coming back and going, I hear that. So you need that for 30 people. Look, the room and you go, you need it for 30 people, and that's no moving on that. And like, the room we've got here is not going to hold 30 people comfortably. We can squeeze them in by all means, but do you really want 30 people squeezed in that small space for 6 hours? And that's when you're responding and going, okay, yeah, I can see your point, and you become much more aligned again. In practice, it can sound like, this isn't what we asked for. And then you can repeat back and look, I hear that this isn't missing the mark. So let's walk through what's missing. And so you're saying, yeah, I'm hearing you that you're saying that this isn't what we asked for. And I get that. I understand that. So I'm here to work with you. Let's walk through the bits that are missing to see where we can find something that does work for you. And that's the kind of language. I know we think of, I hear you, I hear you. Just saying, I hear you isn't enough. You have to hear and then repeat back what it is you heard. So in this case, it is, look, I hear it isn't really really hitting what you expected. So let's have a chat about what's missing and what we can do to plug that gap. So you're also presenting a potential solution in the end too, which is really, really satisfying. Then it comes down to confidence. Confidence is a very, very sexy thing. It certainly makes me understand people better and be able to work with people more completely. And in founders of businesses and in startups, this is where a lot of the you can almost convince Eskimos to buy your ice if you have confidence in those conversations. But confidence really comes from three things, right? It's not a loud thing. It's not yelling. It's something that's controlled, it is steady, and it's very thoughtful. Confidence, we don't think of the people who yell down their microphones and cameras on YouTube. That's not confidence. That's actually overcompensation for people who are highly, highly insecure, and they're pretending not to be. And they have bought into this idea, like that's manosphere thing and looks maxes, like, clavicular and all that. That's not confidence that they are pursuing. They're highly, just very, very insecure people who think that by yelling and saying all these things that they say is somehow going to make people trust them even more. And to a degree, really insecure people will respond really well to that. But do you really want short-term insecure customers? No, you want people who actually align with you. So if you are controlled, if you are steady, if you are thoughtful, if you are very clear in your communication, wouldn't it be nice if your clients are too? Because you're not just going to be mirroring them, they'll be mirroring you. If they understand you are consistent, they are more likely to value consistency too. If they understand that your tone of voice and communication is very well thought out and very considered, then they will also be more well thought out and considered when dealing with you. But if they feel like you're an aggressive person, then when they do have a problem, they're going to come at you aggressively, or they're going to come at you with fear. And you don't want a customer in either of those positions. So this applies beyond just simply having a sales conversation. It's where you're having chats with your teams in meetings, for example. It can be where there's client meetings involved or everyday interactions. Any of this sort of stuff is where this active listening, where this alignment, it really happens. The real advantages is that in sales, it allows you to close faster because you're not confusing people with your pitch and your rate sheet and all this, just constantly going, well, this, and this. You're not rushing people through into decision, and you're not badgering them into agreeing with you. You've already aligned with them. You fully understand what it is they need rather than just trying to fit them to what you do. And if conflict does come up where there's something you don't understand, it helps you to understand and handle that conflict better. Like I said, confidence and even competence is not loud. It doesn't yell. It's not aggressive. It's actually really quiet. And it's something which can come across so much better. So in your next conversation, what you need to really get a hold of, spend more time listening. My grandmother used to say it when I was a kid: 2 ears, one mouth, use them proportionately. So listen roughly twice as long as you speak when you're in those customer conversations. The conversation is theirs to lead. What you're doing is not trying to dominate and cut them off. You're trying to actually align with them and show them that you do align with them so they can trust you to solve that issue. Reflect back what you hear. So you reflect on it. You go, okay, I've heard this. Here's what I heard. And you're letting them know this is what you heard. So you get clarity on what it is that they actually want. And then match their tone, match their pace, match their, not so much the volume, because loud volume can be very aggressive from their end. You want to tone that down. So you're matching their energy. Checklist: You want people to feel safe. You want people to know that you understand them. That's the easy one. You just repeat back what they said. Align the tone and the pace so that you're not bringing that fight or flight in people. They feel scared to respond. And don't rush. Take time to pause and go, just give me a second on that. And I often close my eyes and point to my head. And I go, okay, so what I'm hearing is this, right? All right, let's walk through that. Let's walk through what it could possibly look like. And what it shows is that you care enough to really consider what is they're saying. And that creates more trust than almost any sales techniques or trying to dominate conversations. It doesn't that none of that creates trust. Rapport creates trust. And it isn't magic. It's just a behavioral trait. And you can train yourself to do that. So that kind of thing comes in your next conversation. So I encourage you to start using that. It's certainly something which has changed everything for me. It's made me more approachable and it's made it more aligned with more different kinds of people because I love to listen. I'm genuinely curious, not just for what customers want solved, but what people generally want, particularly in the area of business and entrepreneurship.